Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be looking into something that I think a lot of people are fascinated by, but wouldn't really want to experience themselves.
Oh, yeah.
And that is the world's most notorious prisons.
I can definitely see the fascination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to be going through a document that lists some truly terrifying detention facilities around the world. I mean, imagine being shackled for months, having to live through a full-blown prison riot, or even being stuck in a cell so small that you can't even lie down.
Yeah, the conditions in some of these places are just unimaginable.
It's really hard to fathom, yeah.
Yeah, and I think what's even more disturbing is that these prisons often reflect larger societal problems.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about individual criminals here,
Yeah.
but about systemic failures like
Mhm.
overcrowding, corruption, rampant gang violence, things like that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Okay, so let's jump right in. First up is a place nicknamed the Bangkok Hilton. But spoiler alert, it's nothing like the actual hotel.
Right.
We're talking about Bangkwang Prison in Thailand. It's infamous for its brutal conditions.
Yeah, Bangkwang. One of the most shocking things about that place was the use of leg irons. New inmates were shackled for like their first 3 months, and those on death row, shackled constantly.
Wow.
Yeah. And officially, Thailand abandoned this practice back in 2013, but there are reports that it still happens.
Oh.
Yeah, it's pretty disturbing.
I mean, the psychological impact of that kind of constant restraint must be profound.
Oh, absolutely. It's psychological torture, really.
Yeah.
This constant heavy reminder of your confinement, your powerlessness. It just, it really wears you down.
I mean, is it more about physical control, or is there a deeper psychological element at play there, do you think?
It's both, right?
Yeah.
But the psychological impact is undeniable. Studies have shown that this kind of prolonged shackling can lead to severe trauma that can last even after someone is released.
It makes you wonder if this is truly about rehabilitation or simply inflicting suffering.
Yeah. I mean, if we're aiming for rehabilitation, we need to be addressing the root causes of criminal behavior and providing opportunities for growth and change, not just, inflicting pain.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Speaking of places that seem to breed despair, our next stop is the now demolished Carandiru Penitentiary in Brazil. This was once one of the largest prisons in South America, and it's just a terrifying example of what can happen when overcrowding and neglect spiral out of control.
Yeah. Yeah, the 1992 massacre at Carandiru, that really stands out
Oh, yeah.
as just a horrific reminder of this. Over 100 inmates were killed in a brutal clash with authorities.
It's a chilling example of how easily violence can erupt in those kinds of environments.
Absolutely. And it brought international attention to the dire conditions in a lot of prisons, not just in Brazil, but, around the world.
Did it lead to any significant changes in prison reform, or was it just a moment of outrage that quickly faded?
Well, I think it definitely sparked a global conversation about prison reform, human rights violations, the urgent need for humane treatment of inmates. So, that's at least a start, man.
Yeah. Let's hope those conversations translated into some meaningful action.
That's absurd.
Okay, so from a massive, overcrowded prison in South America, we jump over to Kenya, where we find Kamiti Maximum Security Prison. This facility paints a pretty bleak picture of what happens when a prison is just bursting at the seams. It was originally built to house 1,400 inmates, but they've somehow crammed over 3,600 people in there.
Yeah, Kamiti. I mean, that kind of severe overcrowding, it just leads to a whole cascade of issues, right? Resources stretched thin, sanitation problems, and just this constant underlying tension that can easily boil over into violence.
And I understand there's a section in Kamiti called Block G that's particularly notorious for its brutality.
Block G has a reputation for just like extreme violence and inhumane conditions. Beatings are commonplace, and something as basic as hygiene just becomes a luxury.
What do you mean by that? Like, what's it like trying to maintain even basic hygiene in a place like that?
I mean, imagine having to carry these heavy buckets of water just to wash yourself day after day.
Yeah.
It's dehumanizing.
Yeah.
And it fosters an environment where survival becomes the only thing that matters.
It's a stark reminder that basic human dignity is often just absent in these environments.
Yeah. I mean, when people are stripped of their dignity, it's easier to justify treating them inhumanely, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. Unfortunately, this pattern of overcrowding, lack of basic necessities, and just unchecked violence, it repeats itself in so many prisons around the world.
Our next stop is La Sabaneta prison in Venezuela, another facility that's just bursting at the seams. It was originally built for 15,000 inmates, but now houses a staggering 25,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
The consequences of that level of overcrowding are just horrifying.
Yeah.
There's a severe lack of sanitation, which has led to outbreaks of diseases like cholera.
It's almost unimaginable to think of living in those conditions.
Yeah, and they had a major riot back in '94.
Oh, that's right. That resulted in over 100 inmate deaths.
It's just a stark reminder of how volatile and dangerous these overcrowded prisons can become.
It really is.
So La Sabaneta seems like a case study in how overcrowding creates a breeding ground for desperation and violence.
Yeah.
But there's another layer to this story, right? Something about a stark contrast between how different inmates are treated.
Oh, yeah, that's right. One of the most disturbing things about La Sabaneta is that wealthier inmates can actually use bribes to secure better treatment. They can pay for better food, larger cells, even preferential treatment from the guards.
So within this already deeply flawed system, you have another layer of inequality where the wealthy can buy their way out of suffering while the poor are left to bear the brunt of it.
Exactly. It's a microcosm of the inequality that exists in wider society, magnified within the prison walls.
Yeah. It's a sobering example of how corruption can seep into every facet of a system. From an overcrowded prison riddled with corruption, we shift our focus to another Venezuelan prison, El Rodeo, where a different kind of power dynamic is at play. This time, it's not corrupt officials, but powerful gangs that hold sway.
Yeah, El Rodeo is essentially controlled by prison gangs, many of which have direct links to drug cartels. Their influence just permeates every aspect of prison life there.
I read about a full-blown war that erupted between rival gangs in El Rodeo back in 2011.
Oh, yeah.
What were the details of that?
It was a brutal month-long conflict that involved inmates using firearms against soldiers. I mean, the violence was so intense that the government eventually had to negotiate with gang leaders just to restore some semblance of order.
So it sounds less like a prison and more like a war zone controlled by organized crime.
Yeah, it really highlights the danger of allowing criminal organizations to operate with impunity within prisons. It undermines the authority of the state and creates an environment where violence and lawlessness just thrive.
So far, we've seen how overcrowding and gang violence can turn prisons into dangerous and inhumane places. But now we're going to step back in time to a prison with a long and chilling history. The Vladimir Central Prison in Russia.
Okay.
This facility, which dates back to 1783, was initially used to house political prisoners during the Soviet era.
Vladimir Central. You know, it's a place with a really dark legacy that still casts a shadow over the prison today.
So even though the political landscape has changed, it seems the culture of brutality within Vladimir Central has persisted.
Absolutely. Even today, conditions there are known to be brutal.
Yeah.
Inmates endure daily beatings, both from guards and from fellow inmates.
I came across a particularly disturbing anecdote about a prisoner who wrote a letter in his own blood to protest the abuse.
Wow.
It's a testament to the desperation and the feeling of utter powerlessness that these individuals experience.
It's a chilling reminder of how deeply ingrained patterns of abuse can be within these systems. It's tough to change that kind of culture.
Yeah. From a historical prison steeped in a legacy of brutality, we shift our focus to a modern-day facility shrouded in controversy. Guantanamo Bay Detention Camp in Cuba. This U.S. facility has been under intense scrutiny for years due to allegations of torture and human rights abuses.
Yeah, Guantanamo. One of the things that makes it so unique is its location.
Right.
It's not actually on U.S. soil. It's leased from Cuba. This has created a really complex legal situation where the rights of detainees and the legality of interrogation methods are constantly being debated.
And hasn't there been a lot of controversy surrounding the interrogation techniques used at Guantanamo? What exactly have former detainees alleged?
Yeah, there have been numerous allegations of horrific treatment.
Yeah.
Including like 12-hour interrogations, sleep deprivation, exposure to loud music for extended periods, and physical beatings. I mean, it's really bad.
And then there's Camp X-Ray, which was a separate facility within Guantanamo specifically designed for Taliban prisoners.
Right.
I understand the conditions there were intentionally harsh, designed to break their spirit.
Yeah, Camp X-Ray. It raises serious questions about the ethical boundaries of interrogation techniques and the psychological toll they take on individuals.
It forces us to confront some difficult questions. What methods are acceptable in the pursuit of information, and at what point do those methods cross the line into torture?
Right, exactly. And those are tough questions with no easy answers, unfortunately.
Yeah. It seems that the debate surrounding Guantanamo Bay will likely continue for years to come.
It probably will.
Okay, from the controversial shores of Guantanamo Bay, we head back to the U.S., this time to Pelican Bay State Prison in California. This maximum security facility is known for its extensive use of solitary confinement.
Solitary confinement, that's a whole other issue, right? The psychological impact of that kind of isolation can be devastating.
Yeah. Tell me about Pelican Bay. What's it like there?
Well, it was designed with isolation in mind. Imagine being confined to a small cell for 22.5 hours a day with only a single hour allotted for exercise in a small enclosed yard.
Oh, wow.
It's really harsh. And there have been numerous hunger strikes and lawsuits protesting the conditions there and the psychological damage inflicted by prolonged solitary confinement.
Hmm. So even within a developed nation like the U.S., we see a prison where the focus seems to be on isolation and punishment rather than rehabilitation and reintegration.
Right. Pelican Bay really raises a crucial question. Is the purpose of punishment solely about retribution and incapacitation?
Mm.
Or should it also encompass rehabilitation?
Yeah.
That's a fundamental question we have to grapple with.
It seems like a system that prioritizes isolation and punishment over rehabilitation is ultimately setting individuals up for failure upon release.
Yeah, it creates this vicious cycle where individuals leave prison more damaged than when they entered,
Right.
making it harder for them to reintegrate into society and increasing the likelihood of recidivism.
It's a sobering thought. Shifting our focus to a prison that no longer exists, we come to Tadmor Prison in Syria. While this facility was destroyed in 2015, its legacy of brutality continues to haunt the collective memory.
Yeah, Tadmor was notorious for its systematic use of torture and execution. Reports detailed horrific accounts of prisoners being poisoned, subjected to forced drug administration,
It's hard to even imagine.
hanged, starved, and executed using a variety of cruel methods. It was a truly horrific place.
The 1980 massacre at Tadmor stands out as a particularly horrific event. What happened there?
In 1980, President Hafez al-Assad ordered the execution of all prisoners at Tadmor in retaliation for an assassination attempt against him.
Wow.
Estimates suggest that between 800 and 2,400 inmates were brutally killed in this single event.
It's almost impossible to comprehend the scale of the violence that took place within those prison walls.
It's truly staggering.
Yeah.
And the prison was eventually closed in 2001 due to mounting international pressure over its human rights abuses. But it was reopened in 2011 under President Bashar al-Assad.
Oh, wow.
And tragically, the cycle of brutality continued.
Tadmor serves as a chilling reminder of the atrocities that can occur when power goes unchecked and human rights are disregarded.
Absolutely. It's a stark reminder of the dark side of human nature.
Yeah. Moving on, we come to a prison that epitomizes the devastating consequences of extreme overcrowding. Gitarama Central Prison in Rwanda.
Okay.
This facility was originally designed to hold a mere 500 inmates, but routinely housed between 6,000 and 8,000.
Wow.
The conditions within Gitarama were truly horrific. Imagine being crammed into a tiny, windowless brick cell measuring just 1 square meter with no roof and no sanitation facilities.
Oh my God.
That was the reality for thousands of inmates at Gitarama.
That level of overcrowding is just mind-boggling.
What were the long-term effects on the inmates?
Due to the lack of space, inmates were forced to sleep either standing up or sitting down,
Wow.
which led to widespread cases of leg diseases. The sanitation conditions were appalling,
Yeah.
with inmates forced to defecate within their cramped cells and stand in their own waste. This resulted in rampant infections, gangrene, and even amputations.
Gitarama stands as a stark reminder of how easily overcrowding can transform a prison into a breeding ground for disease, despair, and inhumane suffering.
Yeah. It highlights the urgent need for alternative approaches to incarceration,
Right.
approaches that prioritize rehabilitation and reintegration, rather than simply warehousing individuals in these overcrowded and inhumane conditions.
Finally, we arrive at a prison that has become synonymous with systemic issues within the U.S. prison system, Rikers Island in New York City. This facility has a long and troubled history of violence, abuse, and neglect.
Yeah, Rikers Island. It's been plagued by reports of beatings, human rights violations, sexual assault, and just deplorable living conditions for decades.
Yeah.
Inmates have consistently reported inadequate heating and cooling, infestations of rats, mice, lice, and cockroaches.
It's almost unbelievable that such conditions could persist in a major city within a developed nation like the United States.
I know, right? Despite numerous attempts at reform and promises of improvement, Rikers Island remains a stark reminder of the deep-seated challenges that continue to plague the U.S. prison system.
So what can be done? Is there any hope for real change at Rikers Island, or is it simply a symbol of a system that's broken beyond repair?
Well, while the problems at Rikers are deeply entrenched, There's always hope for change. It requires a multifaceted approach, though. You have to address issues like overcrowding, gang violence, guard accountability, and ensuring that basic human rights are afforded to all inmates,
Mm,
regardless of their crimes.
yeah. You've painted a pretty grim picture of the conditions in these prisons.
It is grim.
It's hard to imagine enduring such hardship and brutality. What lasting effects do these experiences have on the inmates even after they are released?
Well, the trauma experience within these prisons can leave lasting scars, both physically and psychologically.
Yeah.
Many individuals leave prison with deep-seated emotional trauma, difficulty reintegrating into society, and an increased likelihood of recidivism. It's a tough road.
It seems like a vicious cycle.
It is.
The very system that's supposed to rehabilitate individuals is often perpetuating a cycle of trauma and despair.
That's why it's so crucial to advocate for prison reform, to push for humane treatment of inmates, and to support organizations working to provide resources and support for those who have been incarcerated. We can't just turn our backs on this issue.
This deep dive has been a sobering look into the dark realities of the global prison system.
Yeah, it really has.
We've seen how overcrowding, neglect, and abuse can create environments that are both terrifying and dehumanizing.
It's important to remember, though, that there are individuals and organizations around the world working tirelessly to bring about change.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed by the enormity of the challenges, but it's crucial to remember that even small acts of advocacy and support can make a difference, right?
Absolutely. We can choose to look away from these uncomfortable truths, or we can choose to engage, to learn, and to advocate for a more just and humane system for everyone.
That's a powerful call to action. Okay, we're going to take a quick pause here. When we come back, we'll continue our exploration of the world's prisons, looking at some unique and even unexpected examples of institutions that challenge our traditional views on incarceration. Stay with us.
So we've just explored some prisons that really highlight the stark consequences of overcrowding and institutional neglect.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
let's shift gears now
Okay.
and explore some prisons that kind of defy those expectations.
Yeah, that's an interesting contrast.
Yeah,
I mean, it's important to remember that prisons exist on a spectrum.
right.
And while we've seen the darkest end of that spectrum, there are examples that challenge our assumptions about what a prison can and should be.
Exactly. For example, there's Basti Prison in Norway. It's often referred to as the world's nicest prison,
I've heard of it.
and it's located on an island, and the inmates live in these cottages.
Really?
They have access to a beach, a library, and even a recording studio.
Wow. They participate in a work release program where they grow their own food. I mean, it's pretty incredible.
So, Basti, it's
Mhm.
really a fascinating model of a rehabilitative approach to incarceration.
Yeah.
The focus there is on reintegration into society, empowering inmates with the skills and support they need to build productive lives after their release.
It sounds like a world away from the harsh realities we've been discussing.
It does.
I mean, is this model truly effective, or is it an isolated case that can't be replicated in other contexts?
Well, it's true that Basti's model is unique, and it benefits from Norway's specific social and economic conditions.
Right.
But its success, I think, challenges our preconceived notions about what a prison should look like and how it should function.
Hmm.
It suggests that maybe, just maybe, there's a more humane and effective way to address crime and punishment.
It's a model that certainly merits further examination.
For sure.
Now, how about a prison that's essentially a self-governed community? I'm talking about San Pedro Prison in Bolivia. Inmates run their own businesses, families live inside with them, and there's even a democratically elected mayor.
San Pedro. That's a really remarkable example of how, in the absence of traditional external control, inmates can establish their own systems of order and governance.
It sounds like a microcosm of society operating within the confines of prison walls.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. San Pedro really compels us to question the traditional role of the state in regulating these institutions.
Yeah.
Can a balance between security and autonomy be achieved? It's a thought-provoking case study for sure.
Speaking of thought-provoking, I've got one more unusual prison to share.
Okay, I'm ready.
Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
It's called the Cebu Provincial Detention and Rehabilitation Center, or CPDRC,
Ooh.
in the Philippines.
All right.
And it's gained global attention for its, wait for it, dancing inmates.
Dancing inmates. That's certainly not what I expected.
that right?
What's the story behind that?
Well, back in 2007, the prison warden implemented this program where inmates participate in these incredible choreographed dance routines.
Oh,
They've performed to everything from Michael Jackson to Gangnam Style, and their videos have gone viral, attracting millions of views online.
really?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
I mean, what was the initial purpose of this program? Was it purely for entertainment?
It actually started as a way to instill discipline,
Okay.
promote physical and mental well-being, and create a sense of community among the inmates.
Mm.
And it's been surprisingly successful.
Wow.
The dance routines have become a source of pride for the inmates, and the program has garnered international acclaim.
That's amazing. It's a real testament to the power of creative expression,
Yeah.
the resilience of the human spirit, and the potential for positive change, even within a challenging environment like a prison.
It's a remarkable story and a reminder that even in the most restrictive settings, hope and humanity can still flourish. We've talked about the brutal, the historic, the unexpected. And now I'd like to turn our attention to some of the individuals who've spent time in these notorious prisons.
Okay.
Their stories offer valuable insights into the human impact of these institutions.
Absolutely. Individual stories, they really humanize the statistics,
Right.
putting faces and voices to the experiences of those who have lived within these walls.
For instance, there's the story of Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years in prison for his activism against apartheid in South Africa.
Yeah.
His imprisonment became a global symbol of resistance, and his eventual release marked a pivotal moment in the fight for racial equality.
Mandela's story. It highlights the power of resilience, the unwavering commitment to justice, and the transformative potential of even the most challenging experiences.
Yeah.
His time in prison ultimately shaped his leadership and helped pave the way for a more just and equitable South Africa.
Another compelling story is that of Henri Charrière,
Oh, yeah.
the author of the famous book Papillon.
Oh, yeah, Papillon.
His account of his escape from Devil's Island, a brutal penal colony in French Guiana, captured the imaginations of millions around the world.
Papillon.
Yeah.
It's a testament to the human desire for freedom and the lengths to which people will go to escape oppressive conditions.
Yeah.
And it sheds light on the brutal realities of penal colonies,
Yeah.
highlighting the harsh punishments, the dehumanizing treatment, and the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity.
These individual stories remind us that behind the statistics, the prison walls, and the barbed wire, there are human beings with their own unique stories, their own dreams, their own struggles.
It's so important to remember that.
It is. Okay, before we wrap up,
Right.
I want to touch on one more aspect of the prison system.
Okay.
What happens to individuals after they're released? What challenges do they face in reintegrating into society?
Yeah, that's a crucial point. Reintegration is often the most challenging part of the journey for people. Individuals who have served time in prison face numerous obstacles, including stigma, discrimination, difficulty finding employment and housing, and just the psychological and emotional toll of their experiences.
It sounds like they're often set up for failure even after they've served their time.
That's unfortunately true in many cases.
Yeah.
The lack of support and opportunities can lead to a cycle of recidivism where individuals end up back in prison due to circumstances beyond their control.
So what can be done to break this cycle? What kind of support systems are needed to help formerly incarcerated individuals successfully reintegrate into society?
Well, we need comprehensive reentry programs that provide job training, education, mental health services, substance abuse treatment, and housing assistance. Those are essential. And it's also critical to address the stigma and discrimination that formerly incarcerated individuals face.
Right.
This requires education, awareness campaigns, and policy changes that promote fair chance hiring and equal access to opportunities.
It sounds like a multifaceted approach is needed to truly address the challenges of reintegration.
It definitely does. It requires a collective effort from policymakers, community organizations, employers, and society as a whole.
Yeah.
We need to shift our focus from punishment to rehabilitation,
Right.
from isolation to reintegration, and from judgment to understanding.
It's a significant societal challenge, but one that we must address if we truly believe in second chances and the possibility of redemption.
I couldn't agree more. The success of reintegration efforts is not only crucial for the well-being of formerly incarcerated individuals, but also for the safety and well-being of our communities as a whole. When we invest in reintegration, we invest in a safer and more just society for everyone.
Well, this deep dive has taken us on quite a journey.
It has.
From the most brutal and notorious prisons to institutions that challenge our very notion of incarceration.
Yeah.
We've examined systemic failures, individual stories of resilience, and the complex challenges of reintegration.
It's been a wide-ranging exploration,
Yeah.
highlighting the importance of critical thinking, challenging our assumptions, and advocating for a more just and humane approach to the global prison system.
We've covered a lot of ground, and I'm sure our listeners have a lot to think about.
Yeah.
Let's take another brief pause to gather our thoughts. And when we return, we'll distill some of the key takeaways from this deep dive and leave our listeners with some final thoughts to ponder. We've been on quite a journey, haven't we? Exploring the depths of the global prison system, from the most brutal and overcrowded to those unexpectedly humane, even innovative facilities.
Yeah, it's been a real eye-opener.
It has. I mean, we've seen firsthand how these institutions reflect, those broader societal issues.
Right.
They serve as stark reminders of the consequences of poverty, inequality, and systemic injustice.
Absolutely. It's not just about what happens within those prison walls. It's about the society that creates those prisons in the first place.
Yeah, that's a really important point. So as we wrap up this deep dive into, this world of prisons, what are some of the key takeaways you hope, our listeners will carry with them from this conversation?
Well, one of the most crucial takeaways for me is that prisons are not isolated entities. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
They're intricately woven into the fabric of our societies,
Right.
reflecting our values, our priorities, and our collective understanding of justice.
It's a sobering realization, isn't it?
It
The
is.
state of our prisons really speaks volumes about who we are as a society.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if we're truly committed to creating a more just and equitable world,
Yeah.
we've got to start by addressing the root causes of crime and rethinking our whole approach to incarceration.
It's a daunting task, but it's a necessary one, right?
It is. It is.
And throughout our deep dive, we've seen examples of both the devastating consequences of inaction,
Right.
and the glimmers of hope that emerge when we prioritize rehabilitation and human dignity.
Yeah. Think about Bastille Prison in Norway. That's a perfect example.
Right.
Their innovative approach is really a model for what's possible when we focus on reintegration and restorative justice.
Yeah, and even the transformative power of, something as simple as dance at the Cebu Provincial Detention and Rehabilitation Center.
Yeah, that was inspiring.
It shows that even in the most restrictive settings, humanity can prevail,
Yeah.
and second chances are possible.
Absolutely.
So, as we conclude this deep dive,
Okay.
I'm left with this lingering question.
Okay.
What responsibility do we have as individuals, to advocate for a more just and humane prison system?
That's a powerful question.
Yeah.
And it's one that we should all grapple with. We can choose to be passive observers, or we can choose to be active participants in shaping a better future for those impacted by the prison system. We can educate ourselves about the issues, support organizations working on the front lines, and advocate for policy changes that promote fairness, rehabilitation, and reintegration. Even small acts of engagement can make a difference.
This deep dive has been, I think, for both of us, a journey of discovery,
It has.
a confrontation with some uncomfortable truths, and a call to action. We've explored the depths of human suffering and the resilience of the human spirit, and ultimately, it's left me with a renewed sense of hope and a deeper commitment to advocating for a world where justice and compassion prevail. Thanks for joining us on this journey, and remember, the conversation doesn't end here. Continue to explore, to question, and to advocate for a more just and humane world for everyone.